Hi, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our webinar tonight here. This is the part of the series, What We Do, and we welcome all of you who are joining us or in the process of joining. We are looking forward to a great session going ahead as usual for one of the interesting topic, which is on P3 governance principles. So I will give some time for our guests and attendees to join us. And then also we have our esteemed speaker, Mr. Ross Garland, with us, who is joining us from UK today. And then, of course, he's going to give us a lot of nuggets around what is about P3 governance and how those principles are applied in the practical scenarios of project portfolio and program side of the situations in the practical side of today's world. So we are looking for this excited session today. I'm counting the number of people coming in quickly is reached to 68 so far. Good numbers. So let's give us some more couple of minutes in order to let them in, and then we will officially start in 1 or 2 or 3 minutes now. So Ross, I think you are able to share your screen and everything is set, right?
Yes, my screen should be shared now. Everyone should be able to see my screen.
Yeah, but before that as well, I will also share the UAE chapter's introduction slides before we begin officially. So
Sure.
Meanwhile, I will also require to share something once we officially start. Hopefully that will be all fine with us, no problem. Yep, we are 77 now, and then we are at exactly 7 p.m. So good evening again. And the people who are joining us from UAE or in the other part of the world in that case, so good evening or good afternoon, depending on from where you're joining. Please keep your messages coming in through the chats. Introduce yourself if you want to introduce to the rest of the members, and make the best of the opportunity of these webinars. So let me start. I think we are good now. How many people we have now? Near about 85. Okay, good. So just 7, but yeah, I think we will begin next 1 minute.
Got somebody from Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good that people tell that from there they're from. Thank you, Hafiz, for your message to me. I appreciated that, dear. We are 702 now, and then 86 people. I think let's start meanwhile. Those so good. So again, a warm welcome to all of our attendees and PMI UAE chapter members, and who are not the members still. We welcome you, all of you, to really make the best of this opportunity. We are here tonight for PMI UAE chapters webinar series, and today's topic is an introduction to P3 governance principles by our esteemed guest, Mr. Ross Garland. My name is Anshul Chaube, and I'm your moderator tonight with our host, and I'm joined with my colleagues at the back end, Irene, Pervez, and Bhavin, and Amir as well. I would like to explain some housekeeping notes for the people who are joining it first time in that case. And we will go through this webinar in a duration of 1 hour, 15 minutes roughly. Before we launch our webinar topic now, let me introduce you the set agenda, what we're going to go through. First of all, I will start with the brief introduction of the PMI UAE chapter. Also, we'll give you the core webinar presentation from our guest. And then apparently we will have a short time for your question and answers, where Mr. Ross Garland and I will try to do our best to accommodate all your questions within the time frame. We all welcome and encourage all of you members and the guests to post your thoughts on the chat, interact with each other, and make the best use of this webinar to network as well. Also, if you have a question and answers, please make sure that you post your questions on the Q&A section. I will also give the heads up if their questions are in terms of number of questions to our guests, so that we can manage our time. Let me begin my slide sharing for the chapter webinar introduction quickly, and then we will go to introduction of our speaker as well there. So we have reached 96 so far. Good. So I'm sharing my screen. I think we need to unshare the screen, Ross, at your end, or Amir, can you just help out? Thank you, dear. Thank you. Let me try to map up my slide with the sharing, make it at a full screen. Here you go. I believe screen should be visible and then shared. So this is the chapter webinar introduction quickly. Let me take you to the introduction slides. So project management as an institute, we are the part of the well-esteemed institute formed in 1969 by the group of working project managers. After 50 years, PMI is now source and resource of all the things what project management as a principle, as a fraternity does. We are one of the largest association in the world. We offer training and certifications, also publish a lot of research and thought-provoking articles and content. As well, this is our chapter, local chapter, UAE chapter vision, to empower and influence individuals and to innovate the project economy and principles to turn ideas into reality. As per the mission statement, to disrupt and create value, driven to our chapter members and partners to become agile, innovative, productive, and the platform for the growth of project economy. This is our chapter, a few pictures, which gives us a good understanding of we are running 100% by volunteers, 3,000 plus active chapter members. Actually, it's quite a good number. We are ranked among top 5 chapters in the PMI-AMI region. We focus on top leading industry and trends. And also we are serving UAE aspiring community of all you project managers, certified holders, and the professionals. We all depend on you to really help us and make our chapter activities as interactive and invigorating as possible. And also we rely on all the support. This is our board. As you can see, the board is being led by the president, Mr. Adil Sultan, and rest of the board of directors there. In terms of the membership benefit, chapter offers a lot of benefits to network, as well as to show the learning and knowledge and career growth. We are also doing these events, face-to-face event, and one of the event is getting conducted in this month on 17 September. We all welcome you to participate in that. And this webinar, what we're doing is a part of this event series under the diversified webinar section. Our silver sponsors are Dubai Properties in Miras, and our collaboration partners are also listed over the slide. PDU information. So I know there have been a couple of questions keep coming back to us in terms of the delays in the PDU. So be rest assured that PDU informations will not go get away. And then this webinar is going to give you 2 strategic PDUs. Please keep in mind that there are some delays happening because of the technical issues at the portal level. So keep your estimated SLAs in the 8 weeks to get your PDUs on your account credited. If you have any questions regarding the PDUs, keep it attached to the info@pmiua.org, and we will definitely try to reach you back in terms of your right information from the chapter side. Also, please follow us on all the social media. We have been very active in the YouTube and LinkedIn, and as well as the Facebook. You can also visit our website for all our content and the event section. So that was about my session about chapter introduction. Let me resume back. And now before we go to our speaker, let me introduce him quickly so that he can take the floor. So Ross is a global expert in P3 governance, and he has written white papers on UK Cabinet Office. He's a lead author of the TSO guide on the P3, as well as it's a principle-based guide that allows professionals to design, implement, and operate effective with the right governance arrangement in the organization portfolio. He comes with 30 years of global experience and a P3 consultant with last 20 years, focusing on P3G. He's designed, implemented the governance of $1 billion of investments in numerous sectors, including healthcare, aviation, public transport, roads, education, utilities, and ICT. He works and assists senior executives to gain visibility, control, and confidence, and also requires their investment to deliver on the outcomes and benefit. So I think now it's a good time for Ross to take the floor on and to introduce us with all this knowledge of P3G. Over to you, Ross.
All right, thank you very much, Anchal, but I think you have to stop sharing your screen.
Oh, I see. It's not yet stopped. So I think I stopped it here, but give me a minute.
It says I'm still viewing your screen and I can't get my screen up.
So I think it needs to get away by Amir. Can you just unshare, because my screen is unshare with here at my end. Let me just do one thing.
Ross, you can try to share your screen and it will ask whether you'd like to unshare the other's screen.
I'm in now.
Yeah.
I'm in
Is
now.
it-
Hold on a minute.
Is it going away?
Yeah,
I can
fine.
see you now. Yeah, I
Does
think
that
it's
work?
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's good.
fine. Fine now.
Excellent.
Great.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yep.
Yes,
Thank you very much, Angel. I appreciate that. Kind words.
my pleasure.
And good evening, everyone. And thank you for having me. So on the screen there, this is what we'll be talking about today: project, program, and portfolio governance, or P3G. What we're going to do in the limited time available is cover about half the principles. There's 10 principles in total in the guide, and we're going to cover off 5 of them. Just to make it a bit more interesting, so you don't have to just listen to me talk on for the next hour or so, we're throwing in a few questions. We've got a poll. It's anonymous, very important. It's anonymous, so nobody knows who's giving what answers. So please be involved in that. It'd be very interesting to get your views. And we'll use these questions to help explore P3G. Now, you heard all about me. That's me again there. Basically, what that says there is I've spent a lot of time in the last 20 years or so specifically working on P3G, project, program, portfolio governance problems. What's more interesting is this. That's the guide, the P3G guide. Written by myself and Adrian Morey. Now, I used to be based in Australia up until about 4 years ago. I previously lived in the UK, went to Australia and so forth. It's all very complicated. But I worked with Adrian many times in Australia, and he and I are both consultants. And as consultants, the two things you have to be is practical and pragmatic, because that's what your clients are looking for. And so the book itself reflects that. It's a practical book, as it says there. It's practical, it's principles based, it's applicable to all sectors and project types, and it addresses both traditional delivery methods and hybrid. Just expand that a bit so I can see it. As I said, it's got 10 principles. Now we're not going to go through those now because we're going specifically through 5 of them. They're there for completeness, so you can have a look in your own time. Now, what we'll look at first is, why is P3G important? And we've all heard the stories about projects that have failed because of poor project governance. They make the headlines. But the reality is they're just the visible tip of the iceberg. There's any number of projects that are impacted by poor governance, and they somehow muddle through. And when I say muddle through, a project isn't successful just if it delivers, say, an asset. It has to deliver the outcomes. It has to deliver that as asset. So it delivers the outcomes the organization is seeking and the benefits. So it gives that performance delivery, outcomes and benefits, but it does it within the delivery performance requirements. So time, cost, and quality, which you would all know so well. Now, the interesting thing is project and program success or failure are not binary outcomes. We all know that. You know, you've got that huge spread of projects, some of which are more successful than others. Now, if you think about it, any initiative involves numerous decisions, and every decision directs a project down a particular path. So the very first decision, you can have various routes from there, and each decision you make from that point builds up this complex network, a complex decision tree. Now, theoretically, within that complex decision tree, there is only one path that will deliver optimum outcomes. And by that, I mean that all other paths are going to result in somewhat suboptimum outcomes. For example, you might get fewer benefits than you'd expected or than were written into the business case. You might end up with higher costs, or you might have missed schedule dates. So even though a project or program might be viewed by some people as successful, so for instance, it's delivered an output, It's actually failed in its primary purpose, which is to deliver outcomes and benefits, its outcome performance, within the defined scope, time, and cost parameters, its delivery performance. Now, why is P3G important? P3G is important because it's seeking, through the P3G framework that we'll discuss in part, it's seeking to maneuver the initiative as close as possible to that optimum decision path, getting the right people, the right structures, the right documentation in place, so that you start to remove some of the sources of issues, governance issues on projects and programs. Now, for yourselves, why is it important to project managers? Now, I understand that a large number of you will be project managers. I don't need to tell you that when projects go wrong, quite often the finger is pointed at the project manager. Now, if the issue is governance, quite often the organization doesn't even realize that initially. And it's only when there's an investigation into a project that governance can be identified as a particular issue. Now, if you've got ineffective decision-making, it's going to slow projects down and it may result in poor decisions. So if, as a project manager, you walk into a project and you look for the governance arrangements and you see they're not effective, that is important from your perspective alone, never mind from the project's perspective. And you need to be able to recognize what's wrong and help the organization to fix it so that the organization can be successful and you can be successful. And sometimes you'll be the first to identify the problem. If the PMO isn't a particularly strong PMO, it may not recognize that governance is an issue. It might be seeing projects not performing properly, but it hasn't understood the root cause of it. And quite often that root cause comes back to project governance or program governance. So let's talk about P3G itself. So that's the definition that's paraphrased from the guide itself. P3G is the framework that enables effective and efficient decision-making on a portfolio of project and program investments. Now look at that last word, investments. That's what projects and programs are. They're investments made by the organization in its business. And P3G focuses on governing that investment. It focuses on those decisions that help shape investments, whether those decisions are made at the portfolio level or at the project or program level. Which decisions we're talking about, which help shape an investment, we'll talk about shortly. Now, when we talk about P3G being a framework, the framework has got three major components. The first component is the structure. So what committees are involved? What are their terms of reference? What's the relationship between them? The second component is the people who comprise those committees, who they are, how they're chosen, and we'll touch on that today, and what are their accountabilities, and we'll certainly touch on that today. And finally, the third component is the documentation or information that informs people and those committees. Okay, I just want to summarize that in one slide. It's a very important slide. Think of it in this way. An organization manages its projects, but it governs its project investment. The mindset of those two lines is different. You manage a project, but you govern project investment. And when you're talking about something, when you make an investment, you're looking for a return on that investment. You're looking for that investment to deliver you outcomes. And those outcomes could be of various types. Right, let's start off with the principles. So as I said, we're going to go through 5 principles, and this is principle number 2 from the guide. And it's ensure a single point of accountability for each project or program. Now, this principle introduces probably the single most important concept in P3G, which is that concept of accountabilities. Now, there's various accountabilities on a project or program, but the most important accountability is for the success of the project or program. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the accountability for a project lies with the project sponsor, sometimes known by other names, or for a program, the SRO, again, sometimes called other things. Now, there is a perception in some organizations that accountability is about who to blame if things go wrong. Now, I don't need to tell you that that's a very negative interpretation of accountability, and it's not at all helpful when you're trying to achieve project and program outcomes. To start with, it discourages people from taking on accountability. So what accountability is really about is empowerment. This is why accountability is important. Because if you're empowered, you're able to then take action and make decisions. Now, just think if an organization has got a sensible, a logical, documented process for identifying who's accountable for a project or program, then once that person is named by the organization as being the project sponsor or SRO, everyone expects that person to get on with things, to start making decisions. Now, if you don't have that single point of accountability, a project will still move forward, but it'll move forward very slowly, because what happens then is, with nobody named as being accountable, anyone who wants to move it forward has to constantly seek consensus, which is a very slow process. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that a project board shouldn't work on a consensus basis. It does so up to a point. Any project board where there's constant disagreement about the decisions going forward is a project board that's got a problem. But every now and then you will need somebody to say, I've heard all the arguments, but I think we need to go in that direction. And that's the single point of accountability. And there's other aspects to empowerment as well. You need to have budget accountability, or the ownership of the budget, the allocated budget, because if you don't, then you can't enforce the decisions that's being made. If you want to take consultants on, for instance, and you don't have budget accountability, you then have to go to somebody else and they might say no. So what's that mean about your accountability? And there's also business case accountability. Read the guide. It tells you all about those aspects. Now, I know, or I'm guessing what some of you are thinking, which is that I already know this. Tell me something I don't know. Now, as a consultant, I go into any number of organizations who also tell me they know this. So let me just show you one of the ways in which organizations get this wrong. So, very simple scenario here. An organization establishes a governance structure to run an important project. And you can see what they've set up there. They've identified a project sponsor. Let me click the button. Nope. There we are. They've identified a project sponsor. They've identified a project board. The project board's made up of the major project stakeholders. That's a big tick. That's what you want. The project sponsor is the key stakeholder, and they've identified the project sponsor as being accountable for the success of the project. So they've got that right. Excellent. And the project sponsor and project board reports into the divisional manager. And the divisional manager in this instance is a very experienced person, experienced in both the business and the project. And their role is to endorse decisions made by the project board and project sponsor. As I say, I have seen this many, many times. And what this is doing is blurring accountability, because you can't have a situation where a project sponsor is identified as being accountable for the success of a project, but then their decisions are being second-guessed by their divisional manager. Because at some point, if you put a divisional manager and say your role is to endorse the project board's decisions, for the most part, they might treat it as a rubber stamp, but if they're very risk averse, at some point, they're going to question a decision and they're going to change a decision. And what's that mean? Well, first of all, you've blurred accountability because the project sponsor can't be held accountable for a decision they don't make or don't agree with. Secondly, if you take that approach, you've chosen the project sponsor, presumably because they're the best placed decision maker for this particular project. So immediately somebody else is ratifying their decisions or endorsing their decisions, you haven't got the best person making the decisions. And that's not all the problems you'll end up with. The other thing you'll get is you have a project board, and the project boards are normally made up of fairly senior managers. Now, if senior managers are seeing that the decisions they're making are being endorsed or not endorsed by somebody else, they're going to start to lose faith in that project board. Why should they sit there making decisions that are overturned by somebody else? So what you end up with is authority leaking away from the project board. You end up with secondees attending instead of the member to the project board meetings. So many organizations do that. So just bear in mind that when you're talking about a single point of accountability, it really does bite. It means that they should have the decision making. And just while we're on it, actually, there's another problem we come up with. And that is when the project sponsor goes to make a decision, they may not have the financial delegation, the financial delegated authority to make that decision. And so they then have to go up the chain, perhaps to the divisional manager again. And that in itself creates a problem because the divisional manager will be feeling at risk if they don't understand all the issues of the project before they make that decision. And so you end up with this cycling of the decision, and it can take weeks. I've seen it even take months in an organization simply because they didn't fully understand single point of accountability. Now, what we've talked about here blurs another very important principle. And before we go into that principle, I'm going to ask you a question. Now, Amir, this is where we have a poll. So that's the question. Now, can we get, fantastic. Well, like magic, isn't it? So let's have a look at the question. Which of the following persons is least likely to be the ideal project sponsor of a major complex IT project? Right? Least likely. Who is least likely to be the head, to be the project sponsor of a major complex IT project? So put your views in. Are we getting responses coming in? Do I have to look at the Q&A or? Are we getting any responses in? I'm not seeing anything here.
CEO 25%, CFO 29%, CIO 25%, COO 19%.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so that's interesting. We've got a spread. We've got a significant spread across the various parties. So let's investigate. Let's take the poll away for now. Thank you. And let's investigate that question. Let's investigate it further. Oh, that's it. Well, that's good. 29, 29, 23, and 18. So it's a relatively even spread. Okay, let's go back to basics. Organizations invest in projects and programs to achieve business outcomes. Now, think about any organization. If I gave you an org chart for a large organization, I said to you, who is accountable for customer service outcomes? Just an example. Who's accountable for customer services outcomes? You'd have a look through the org chart and you'd probably see somebody called the customer services manager or customer services divisional manager, whatever. And that's the person who is accountable for customer service outcomes. Now, no matter what what outcome an organization is trying to achieve, it will have somebody in its day-to-day business activities who's accountable for that business outcome, whether that business outcome is a service such as customer services, whether the business outcome is about profitability, revenue, market share. There will always be somebody there who holds that accountability. So we're going to call them the business owner. So we have a business owner within the organization. This is the role they were appointed for. When they took on the job, this is the role they were appointed for, business owner of that particular area. And we know that they're accountable for delivering business outcomes. Now, at some point, you're going to reach a situation, that business owner is going to reach a situation where they realize that the systems and processes that they're currently using, or the assets that they're currently using, are no longer sufficient to give them the outcomes that they want. They're going to hit that point. And they'll hit it because technology changes, because demographics change. There's all sorts of issues. Is somebody after a question there? Somebody? No? I'll just continue on.
Yeah,
Right, so
continue. We will take the questions later, Ross.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, so at some point, the business owner recognizes that they're going to need to change the level of business outcome that they're dealing with, either with new technology, new services, new processes, whatever. And to do that, what they do is they institute a project, right? That's one way of thinking of a project. It enables you to get from one level of business outcome to another level of business outcome in an organization. Now, as soon as you have a project, the very first thing you do is appoint a project sponsor. You can't have a project without a project sponsor, because the project sponsor is the person accountable for the project. So otherwise, the project just meanders and spends money without a project sponsor. Now, we know that the project sponsor is accountable for project outcomes. That's their role. We've said that. So the business owner is sitting there thinking, I need those project outcomes to exactly equal the business outcomes I need to continue to do my role. In other words, if it's a customer services project, I need the outcome that customer services solution provides to be exactly what I need. Now, there is only one way that you can possibly ensure that the outcomes that the project delivers are exactly the outcomes that the business needs. And the way to do that is to make them the same person. The project sponsor is the business owner. Now, you might throw your hands up and say, well, hold on. The business owner doesn't understand the technical details of the project or the program. And that may well be the case. It quite often is the case, especially in complex technological solutions. But it's not the issue. It might be the case, but it's not the issue. The issue is you want your project sponsor to represent the business. And if they need assistance in doing that, in running that, not in running that project, in governing that project, and they need help on the technology side, then you provide that. But the important thing is to get that business interest. So when you do this, if you think about it, what this means, that accountability for the project should rest with the person who is also accountable for the business outcome the project will enable. In other words, you can turn this around in various ways. BAU accountability for a business outcome, so the customer services manager, confers the right of ownership of the project that will deliver that business outcome, the customer services project. Now, The principle is stated as this: business outcome accountability determines project or program accountability. Now, if you follow that principle, and I certainly hope you would follow that principle, not all organizations do. You often, in fact, you often see it in this scenario. That's the poll that you did. The person least likely to be the ideal project sponsor, right? Well, I have some sympathy for those of you who said the CEO, because generally speaking, you try and avoid the CEO being the single point of accountability because they've got a very difficult day job and they probably don't have the bandwidth. So if at all possible, you avoid using the CFO. However, you might end up with an organization that has a mission critical project or program, which, were it to fail, could jeopardize the future of the organization, in which case, who's the best person to lead it? The CEO, and you support them as necessary. Similarly, if it's a SAP implementation, the CFO might be the ideal person. If it's a logistics solution that you're looking for, the COO might be the ideal person. The CIO, on the other hand, is likely to be the person who enables technological solutions within the organization. They support the business. They're not the core business. The core business is either, well, the core business is the core business of the organization, but they're not part of it. They support the organization. Interestingly, though, as soon as you've identified your project sponsor, the first person you have sitting alongside them on the project board in that scenario that I've talked about in that poll would be the CIO, because they're the supplier representative. And quite often they will act as that technological translation for the project sponsor. So the project sponsor understands what's happening technologically. But when push comes to shove and you're making decisions, you don't want it to be made by the delivery side of the business, because their focus is on time, cost, and quality. It's not necessarily on outcomes and benefits. Okay. Right. As I said, I'm suspecting that many of you are project managers. So I want you to imagine that you're the project manager and you are sitting outside the project board meeting and you're waiting to be called in. Now, this is an important meeting for you because in your hand, you've got the project plan, and the project plan contains your resource plan. Now, you're already starting to fall behind schedule, so you need the resources ASAP. So when you go into that project board meeting, what you need is a clear and unambiguous decision regarding your project plan. Either the board approves it, or if they don't approve it, they tell you specifically what you need to do to change it so that you can get it approved. Pardon me. So that's what you're seeking. Now the door opens and you're ushered into the project board meeting. And I'm going to give you two scenarios. Scenario one, sitting around the table, waiting to hear your presentation on your project plan, are 16 people. Scenario two is sitting around the table, waiting for you to give your presentation, are 6 people. Now, all other things being equal, which scenario, 6 or 16, do you think is most likely to give you a clear and unambiguous decision regarding your project plan, in fact? 6 or 16? Now, I know you can't answer me, but I want you to be thinking about it. And my guess is you're all thinking the same thing. And I'll give you a clue. It's not a trick question. We all know the answer to this, don't we? 16 people sitting around a table can do lots of good things, but clear and unambiguous decision-making isn't one of them. Why? Because there's just too many people. What's interesting, though, if you went around the table and asked everybody there, that all have a good answer, that all have a good reason for their presence. And they would all state that they would be stakeholders of this project. And that's your problem. You see, when you went through that door, what you wanted was a project decision-making forum. And instead, with 16 people, what you've got is a stakeholder engagement forum. Stakeholder engagement, have I written this down? I think I have. Stakeholder engagement and project decision-making are two separate functions, and they need to be treated differently. So we're going to have a look at how you treat them differently, and you have to do it very carefully, of course. Let's have a look at why. So there's our stakeholder spectrum. Down the left of that diagram, you can see all those stakeholders for whom the project has a relatively minor impact. Meanwhile, at the far right of the line there, you will see those stakeholders for whom this project has a very major impact. And of course, your project sponsor will be down furthest down that right-hand end. That's why they're the project sponsor. But we can't put all of those people, there could be dozens of them there. We can't put them all inside a project board meeting because nothing's going to get done. We know that. So we need to draw a line. Now, wherever we draw that line, to the right, we're going to say, these are the core decision makers, and they're going to sit in the project board. To the left of it, we've got other stakeholders. Now, there's an issue there, isn't there? Because just to the left, where's my cursor? Just to the left of this line here will be some very important people, many of whom will think they should be in this group over here. And perhaps on other projects, they would be in that group. But for this project, you wanted a tight group, and you figured that you would have to deal with their needs otherwise. So we need to draw another line. And that line shows decision influencers, these very important people who must have their say on the project. If they've got concerns about the project, you need to hear about it. If they've got issues, you need to hear about it. They have to have their say. And to the left of them, there's other non-core stakeholders, and there'll be ways and means of keeping them involved with user groups and reference groups and so forth. We're talking about the key decision-making here. Oh, where's my cursor gone? There it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up another group. This is a big project, remember. We're going to set up another group, and we're going to put the decision influencers inside that group. And I've called it here. It doesn't matter what you call it, as long as it reflects the importance of the people who are inside that committee. I've called it the Strategic Advisors Committee. Now, the fact of the matter is, even if you set up a group for them, they're not going to be happy because they still want to make sure their issues, concerns, and advice is taken on board by the project board. And the way you ensure that happens is you chair that Strategic Advisors Committee with the project sponsor, the same person who chairs the project board. That way, the strategic advisors know they're talking to the key decision maker on the project, and any issues or concerns they have is going to go straight across into that project board meeting. And what you normally try and do is hold a strategic advisors meeting maybe a week ahead of the project board meeting so that that transfer of ideas works, transfer of issues, concerns, and so forth. So that, of course, is a very simple model, yeah? And complex projects are far more complex than that. But you can see the concept there of making sure that the people who aren't in that project board, which you want to keep tight, are still getting their issues, concerns, and advice taken on board. Pardon me. So principle 5 is separate project and program decision-making from stakeholder engagement. If you do that, it prevents decision-making forums becoming clogged with stakeholders, which results in slow and inefficient decision-making. But when you do it, you have to put in place stakeholder engagement mechanisms. Oh, you have to pardon me. I think I'm losing my voice. I'm sure I'll last out though. Right. Okay, let's move on. Next question. We're going to be talking about the business case. So here's an, oh, wow, look at that. When has the business case done its job? So there are your options. When the initiative's detailed or functional design has been finalized. When funding has been obtained for the initiative, very important role of the business case. When the main procurement contract has been signed, or when the initiative has been completed. So put down your thoughts and we'll have a look at the outcome of the poll. Okay, Amir, let's have a look at what we've got. We're going to get the poll results up there. Yes, excellent. Okay, what have we got? 26% regarding the design, 22% regarding funding, 5% when the main procurement contract has been signed, and 47% when the initiative has been completed. Interesting, right? Let's investigate this then. Okay, the business case has got two roles. Everyone knows the first role. It's to justify the investment and therefore enable the investment to get funding. The critical role of the business case. However, the business case also acts as a key governance tool. So let's see how that works. So you've got the latest approved version of the business case. The project board or program board, if I say project board, I also mean program board unless I specifically say otherwise. The project board should use the business case to assess any changes against the agreed business case baseline. So in other words, anything that could impact any change that could impact that business case, it could impact its benefits, its schedule, its cost, its interdependencies, constraints, and so forth. That all needs to be measured against the parameters in that business case to make sure that it's fully understood what the implications of that change is. So for instance, let me give you for instance, during implementation of a project or a program. So you're into implementation, and I'm sure you've all come across the fact that the business case does tend to be put on the shelf once funding has been achieved, because most people consider that that's the end of its role. But imagine cost pressures on a project, and it's forcing that, let's say it's forcing a need to de-scope. So the first thing you have to do is work out, well, how are we going to de-scope this project? Which elements are we going to de-scope? Now, there's a tendency in organizations to focus on cost and say, okay, if we take this lump out here, That will get us below the parapet. We'll be back on track. What you need to be doing as well, like cost is obviously important, you need to be looking at the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, or the problems that you're trying to solve, or the benefits you're achieving, and identify what the impact on those is, because they're all part of that business case. It's not just about cost. It's not just about scope. So only by measuring changes or potential changes against the business case can a decision be made regarding those changes, their impact on the business case, and the ongoing viability of the initiative. And just out of interest, remember we talked about business outcome accountability determines project accountability. Let's say an organization got the wrong project sponsor. They didn't follow that principle. So instead, you've got the CIO as the project sponsor for a particular project rather than the business owner. The CIO's focus is going to be on time, cost, and quality. They're not paid to look at benefits because the benefits don't belong to them. They belong to the business owner. Now, equally, they've probably got an employment contract which talks about their performance in terms of bringing in projects on budget and within cost. So they're going to make a decision that could be very different from the decision that a business owner would make. And so just going back to that principle, that is why you want business at the heart of decision making. Now, again, don't get me wrong. The CIO might be putting their hand up in that project board meeting and saying, look, if we go this way, if we eliminate this element of scope, we can cut quite a bit of cost, and we can stop the project 3 months earlier, complete the project 3 months earlier. And then it becomes a discussion between the business owner and that supplier representative as to whether that's worthwhile or not, because the business owner, meanwhile, is looking at all the benefits they're going to lose. So they've got two different focuses, two important focuses, but two different focuses. Okay, so when has the business case done its job? It's when the initiative has been completed. The business case, any project board meeting, the business case should be sitting there on the table so that project board members can refer to it, so that if there is a change, what is the impact of that change on those parameters in the business case? Right, I better get a move on here. So, have to maintain the business case, principle 7 of the guide. Moving on, question, okay, this is a great one. What decisions are made by a project board? Now, this is critical because as the project manager, if you don't know what decisions are made by the project board, who do you go to? Do you make the decision yourself? Or if you're not sure, does that mean you keep pushing decisions up to the project board? So unless you know what decisions they should be making, you don't know what decisions you should be making. This can slow down decision making a lot because by default, decisions keep bubbling up to the project board. Okay, so what decisions made by a project board? Any decision that has a material impact on the project's business case. We're just talking about business case. Any decision that can impact the budget. Those decisions outside of the financial delegation's authority of the project manager. In other words, you don't have the authority to make that decision. Or decisions defined in the project board's terms of reference. Okay, answers, please. Any decision that have a material impact on the business case, rating at 30%. Anything that can impact the budget, 8%. Financial decisions at 20%, or decisions defined in the project board's terms of reference. Okay, we've got a bit of a spread again. Excellent. Let's investigate what the true answer might be. Let's start with what's in a business case. So, Some of the things we all know that a business case has to justify the investment. So you've got a cost benefit or benefit cost ratio, and you'll have economic analysis and financial analysis and all those good things. But there should also be some very important parameters in there. Parameters like, what is the need for this project? Why are we doing this project? What are the benefits we're going to get from the project? What's the budget? What's the schedule? What are the outcomes we're seeking? The scope, risk, quality, constraints, interdependency, source of funds. That's a selection. There's invariably more. But any of these decisions are really important, because if you were to change any one of those, you could change the project itself. So there's all those parameters. Now, I want you to imagine that those parameters form a box, and we're going to call that the business case box. Now, this is a useful analogy for you. If you change any of those parameters, what you're effectively doing is changing the shape of the box. Now, the box represents the business case, and the business case is owned by the project sponsor. It defines what they're trying to achieve. So if you change the shape, if you change any of those parameters, you're changing the shape of the box. So that means that any change to any of those key parameters there must be made by the project sponsor or the SRO. So if the business case, and let's hope there's a business case, otherwise you've got a bit of an issue on your hands, but if there's a business case, providing it addresses the key parameters of the project, those things I just spoke about, if it addresses those, you can safely say that the SRO makes any decision that can have a material impact on the program business case, because that's what they own. They own the business case. The project sponsor then makes any decision that can have a material impact on the project business case. So that being the case, we can put in place a general guideline on decision rights. Who makes what decisions? And you can see on the left there, we've got a portfolio committee at the top, typical governance model for an organization. Portfolio committee, then you'll have potentially multiple program boards with SROs, program managers. You'll have each program will be made up of multiple projects, each with its own project sponsor, project board, and then you've got project managers. Who makes what decisions? Right. We've just said, if you change the shape of that box, you're changing the project. So any material changes to the project. Now put brackets business case in there. So the decision right is any material changes to the project business case that does not impact the program is made by the project sponsor and project board. I put in brackets there because if there is no business case, if you find yourself in that situation, the reality is it becomes then any material changes to the project. The trouble is, how do you work out what a material change is if there is no document that defines those key parameters? So that's just to bear in mind. Now, this makes this provides a lot of clarity around the decision-making role of the project manager. They make day-to-day decisions that have no material impact on the project. So what that means is, if we go back up a bit, if we go back up a bit, the project sponsor owns the box. Now, in a perfect world, the project manager goes inside the box. This is the concept of management by exception. If all of those parameters should have a tolerance associated with them, and the project manager has the freedom then to work inside that box, knowing that the only time they specifically need to go to the project board, and I don't mean regular reporting, but any time they specifically go there is if they're in danger of exceeding a tolerance on one of those parameters. Right. And that gives, as a project manager, that gives you clarity of decision making. You know exactly what has to go up, and you know exactly what decisions you can make yourself. The program board, of course, makes any material changes, makes decisions regarding any material changes to the program business case that don't impact the portfolio, right? So some programs will be so big, if they were, if you were to make a significant change to them, they could impact the portfolio itself. So the SRO, that's one of the things, one of the reasons why SROs get paid big money. They've got to keep their eyes on the portfolio as well as their own program. And the portfolio committee make decisions regarding any material changes to the portfolio, and that might be in respect of programs and even projects itself. So the answer to the question then, what decisions are made by a project board? Any decision that has a material impact on the project's business case. Important thing being, A, it requires a business case, and B, it requires that business case to be quite clear around those key parameters. And as a project manager, you need that. You need that clarity. So principle 9 from the guide is ensure consistent and logical decision-making rights.
Ross,
Hello.
just a good heads up. So we are running short of the time, could be. So what might be we have to a bit expedite this. If how much slides are left over there for you?
I have 2 slides left, and I was just about to expedite my exit.
Thank you.
Okay. Right. So that's the 5 principles that we've run through there. The guide, as I say, have 10. There's some opportunities for you there with discount codes should you be so interested. And that is it. Thank you very much for your time.
You are absolutely on the money over there. So I think the last slide definitely was quite useful. You have shared the code as well. And I learned that there is a exam which people can go through, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So would you like to speak something about it during the last slide? Just to give you a heads up to the audience to motivate them in that case. Yep.
Yeah. So we've got a course. There's a 3-day course that's run on P3G, and it's we've now got accredited training organizations around the world operating it. So we've got, what is it, New Zealand, Australia, the Middle East, Canada, UK, of course.
Okay.
So we do that, and we offer certification. And to be certified, you have to pass an exam, 50 multiple choice questions, and set by myself. And Alberto, is there anything I haven't remembered to say about that? I don't think so. You can either do it by following the course, going through the course itself, which I strongly recommend, but alternatively, you can do a self-study. We've had some people do self-study.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was quite useful information, Ross. We have a couple of questions which I am trying to wrap it up there. One is coming from Irene, is that too much governance can annoy stakeholders, while relaxed governance can lead to a lack of stakeholders' engagement or accountability. What is your comment, Ross, on this?
Right. Can you just repeat that? Say that again, please.
Sure. So the comment is that basically too much of governance can annoy the stakeholders, right?
Yeah,
And the projects, while relaxed governance can lead to lack of stakeholders' engagement as well. So
yes.
How do you manage this up?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Very good point. So if you over-govern a project or a program for that matter, it will stifle the project or the program, and it's going to slow the project or program down. So what you want always is just enough governance to put it in place. And we talk about it in the guide there. It's hugely important, for instance, if you're talking about agile projects. So you need to have just that amount of governance. And I've even heard it said that for an agile project, You don't need a business case. You don't need a project board or whatever. I
Mm.
disagree wholeheartedly with it. You still need it. It's just that you approach it differently.
Correct. Absolutely.
The guide, by the way, also talks about scale.
Also talks about it. Yeah. Scrum guide. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely correct. Yeah. Okay, so I think the right balance is the just enough governance is the answer, and of course there is no one silver bullet to achieve that factor just enough. It's that's what comes with approach and bad experience as well. How to approach these different projects and programs, and even sometimes the portfolio conflicts. A lot of questions is also I'm seeing the couple of questions attributing to one single point is that Ross, is that how this P3G is different from PMI certifications or PMBOK standards and all that? Are they connected? Are they complementing each other? Are they overlapping? What's your views?
They're certainly complementary, certainly with PMI standards and with the old Axelos standards. I think what this does is if the boss calls you into their office and says, the governance on that program isn't working, I want you to fix it. In my opinion, this is the guide you go to, because it will tell you, have we got the right project sponsor? Have we given them sufficient authority? Have we got the decision-making rights correct? Do we know who's making what decisions on this? Have we got any disenfranchised stakeholders and so forth? I said right at the very beginning, this guide is very much focused on practicality and pragmatism. So it doesn't go into very much theory at all. I'm not a theory person. I'm a consultant. I solve problems. And that's what this book is aimed at. It's aimed at the person who needs to solve the problem or understand what the problem is.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Last question before I depart over there from Mr. Dheeraj is that sometimes stakeholders advisory committee members may be offended for not being onto the project board and may negatively influence the project. So how do we deal with it?
And I've come across that so many times. And yeah, having an unhappy stakeholder outside of the board can seriously impact the project. I actually cheated once where I knew that this was going to happen. So I changed the names of the two boards. So it became the Stakeholders Advisory Committee that was the decision-making board, and the project board became an advisory committee. But I just didn't tell them that. But the fact of the matter is you could always end up in that situation. All you can do is give them the logic behind the decision. We need a tight decision-making group, and we want, but we don't want to disenfranchise stakeholders. And so you are going to be in this stakeholder advisory committee. Then it comes back to pragmatism. If they're going to continually cause problems for the project, maybe you slip them in, maybe you put them in because that's the nature they are. Trouble is, if you do that, by the very personality that you're describing there, they could disrupt the project board. So there's all sorts of factors involved. There's no one answer that you can give for that. It's a very good question for that reason. Absolutely.
I think totally agree with him. So thank you, Dheeraj, for that lovely question, dear. I think good, Ross. I think we are good on time. We are 8:07 already. So definitely a big warm thank you to you to bring this enlightenment about how this P3G is complementing the project managers and is going to rescue them in case of the practical situations which they can get confronted around the decision-making aspect or the governance aspect, which sometimes might get into hindsight into the project management approaches, because project management goes much more deeper into nitty-gritty of operations and executions, and to a point to the strategy creations of projects, and of course coming to the program management, that's another level there. But yeah, wonderful session. I think at quite a good of nugget of insights people have got it through. So I think I would like to give a big thank you to all of you friends who have been participating in these webinars and attending these webinars, and to a marketing team who are responsible for posting the relevant information on our social media for PMI UAE chapter. We are going to close this webinar tonight. I would like to thank to all of you again for your participation and lovely questions. And Ross, and Alberto as well, for you that you took your time to give this knowledge information to all of our audience as well. We would not say good night until we say rest of the PMI UAE chapter volunteers who always been working very hard and making these webinars success. So with my colleagues from membership, outreach, volunteering and finance governance team, until our next webinar, before we are going to get away on 28th of September, if I'm not wrong, we are also having a face-to-face event this month. So please make sure that if you're not enrolled yet, please try to enroll on that. The information is available on the PMI UAE chapter WhatsApp group as well, or you can get in touch with any one of us over there. So until our next webinar, together with my colleague behind the camera, Amir, and the events team, this is Anchal here, wishing you all a pleasant evening ahead. Thank you for all your participations, guys, and thank you, Ross, once again, and God bless.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Alberto.
Thank you, Ross. Alberto.
Thanks, everyone.